I would like to call this meeting to order, and it is 2:05 p.m. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Board of Vocational Nursing and Psychiatric Technicians, December 7, 2023 board meeting. My name is Carol Mountain, and I'm the board president. First, some housekeeping information on how this meeting will be conducted. This meeting is being held via WebEx. If we need a motion, I will call for a motion. Please use the raise hand function for recognition to make or second a motion. I will take a roll call vote for each motion. We will take public comment on each agenda item. When I ask for public comment, please use the raise hand function for recognition. Members of the public who request to speak will have up to 3 minutes to speak, and you will be notified when you have 30 seconds remaining. Your name is not necessary, but please indicate how you would like us to identify you. For the sake of efficiency, the executive officer may respond directly to public comment or defer to the appropriate staff person or counsel as appropriate. For any questions directed to board members, I will either answer the question or direct it to the board member as appropriate. We will now do an alphabetical roll call to establish quorum. Board members, when your name is called, please introduce yourself and give a brief description of your role with the board. Taisha Brown.
Present. Taisha Brown, board member.
Thank you. Alita Carpenter.
Yes, Alita Carpenter, public member, chair of the Dredge Committee.
Thank you. John Durking.
Good afternoon, John Deerking, public member.
Abraham Hill.
Good afternoon, Abraham Hill, psychiatric technician, board member.
Ken Maxey. All right, we'll come back to Ken Maxey. Leslie Moore.
Leslie Moore, board member.
Thank you. Nellie Nieblas.
Nellie Nieblas, board member.
Thank you. Gloria Guzman.
Licensed vocational nurse, Gloria Guzman, board member.
Oh, Gloria, it's really hard to hear you, but thank you.
Sorry.
Rashima Sansan.
Good afternoon, Rashima Swanson, board member.
And I'm Carol Mountain, education member. Based on the roll call, we have a quorum. I'd like to move on to agenda item number 2, introduction of board staff. Ms. Yamaguchi.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you all so much. I know a lot of you probably rearranged some commitments to be here today. We genuinely appreciate it. This is really, truly one of the most important meetings we're going to have. So with us today, our AEO, Mark Ito, team admin, Rebecca Ball, Cheryl DiCristoforo. From enforcement, our chief, Antoinette Wood, and managers, Jeff Weiler, Maggie Archibald, Jay Prouty, and Eric Delgado. From education, our SNEC, Beth DeYoung, our NECs and staff, Cindy Fairchild, Roberta Thompson, Tara Davila, Judith McLeod, Charlene De La Rosa, Nicholas Gonzalez. And from licensing, we've got Michael Hall, Shelley Brown, and Gabriela Areola, and myself, Elaine Yamaguchi, your EO. Madam Chair.
Thank you. Legal counsel, please introduce yourselves.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the board. This is Ken Swenson, Board General Counsel.
Thank you. I believe we're ready to move on to agenda item 3, the sunset report, recommendations and possible actions. Ms. Yamaguchi.
Wonderful. Again, thank you all so much. This has been an enormous effort from pretty much everybody in the team. Just to preface, I know that the draft we shared with you and then with the pages to swap out with the updated stats, not as pretty as it should be. And I do want to absolutely promise that after the board has finalized this the information, we do send it to the department's publications department to make it pretty. They'll add the title page, they'll add the table of contents, they'll format the attachments. I absolutely adjust our formatting, the margins, the tables, the headers. These are things that unfortunately Microsoft Word does funny things sometimes, and you try and fix something and you think it looks right on the screen, you save it, and apparently it doesn't. So like I said, I do apologize for that, but I do want to promise you that the final document that we'll see by the end of the year / early January should be much, much prettier. So by way of background, this report is dated from July 1, 2019 through June 30 of this year. There's a little bit of an odd part here because our initial sunset report, former sunset report was submitted at the end of 2019, but then COVID interrupted the hearing schedule. And so we weren't heard until 21, and at which point we did actually provide the legislature with some updates, but it wasn't a whole new report. So we've been asked to make this report cover the entire period from full report to this full report. So without, and excuse me, I'm having a bad allergy day. So I think my recommendation to process today would be just to walk through section by section. I had a couple of comments just emailed to me, and then of course, board member Sansan went above and beyond and sent me a list of, I think, 8 different questions or comments or suggestions. So what I thought we would do, as I said, was walk through section by section and allow board members to comment, ask questions, make suggestions for clarifications, and then also respond to certainly Ms. Sansan's questions. And the version I'm going to try and put up on the screen also had some other amendments, edits, updates really from the staff. I know that we updated a few things in the education section and in the enforcement section. So if that's okay with everybody, I'll just start at the beginning and see if I can put this up on the screen. Okay. Does everybody see this okay? All right, so here we of course have, looks good? Okay. So of course, obviously section 1, background description of the board, describes our professionals and talks about the structure of the board. And really, I think rather than going into the long history, they really do ask us to focus on just the period we're reporting on. So it says we had these regular meetings. I listed the special meetings we had, and they asked us about the default decision delegation, which was part of our 21 legislation, and the board had voted to implement that. This had been a long-standing discussion between the board and the legislature, so they specifically did ask us about that. The next section, of course, the committee structure. We have a very brief paragraph here about what the committees are, but we are also appending that much more detailed description of the committee structure as an attachment. It shows, the goals, the purposes, the jurisdictions, if you will, who on the staff is assigned. Then we branch into this long table of board member attendance. This goes back to anybody who was on the board as of July 1, 2019, and all the way to our newest members. It should show who attended and meetings that you attended, meetings you missed. It should show the date you were appointed, the date either you left the board or your appointment expired. And for those of you today, I hope you looked, and if there's no errors in recording your attendance, if there are, please let me know, because the legislature and the governor's office does look really carefully at this table to make sure that our board members are helping to run the place. So, but like I said, I think I'm sorry. I'm scrolling down so I'm sure I'm probably giving some of you a headache. But so far, anybody have any corrections or suggestions, questions? Okay. So
Elaine,
this, of course,
if you could go back up to a prior page in the top entry for, if you keep going up. There's an entry in the attended column that has I think it might be down further, but it has additional text other than yes or no.
oh, I see. I think I know what you're talking about. It would have been, I think, Miss Niblas, because there was a meeting that she was at one day and not the other. This one here?
I see. That's what that denotes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good. So we managed to have quorum every time. I'm actually very, very proud of that. We were also hoping to include the table that documents the members' submissions and mail ballots. I'm very proud of that as well, because the board members have done a super job in helping out with that big function of what the board members are asked to do. Describing any major changes, we have transitioned to a few things. We've made some precedential decisions. We don't conduct any studies, or have not anyway. And mostly our national associations are with the National Council of State Boards of Nursing.
Excuse me, this is Alita Carpenter.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, on the third presidential decision, I was a little unclear on the cost recovery language. Does that mean that the cost recovery is immediately due and payable for people who fall within this category? I just wasn't sure.
No, that's a good question. Usually, a cost recovery is assessed, and a payment plan is worked out with the person. And in the event that they cannot pay or don't complete probation or anything, we will ask that. Well, we will assess them the cost in full if they decide to reapply to become a nurse again or a psych tech again.
Right. But this language it's payable upon reinstatement, particularly where, as here, the award has already been reduced. So it wasn't quite clear to me.
I see.
May I address that question?
Thank you, sir.
So that aspect of this presidential decision is to provide guidance to administrative law judges in future cases that the board does not generally authorize the administrative law judge to make the cost recovery award only due and payable upon reinstatement. In other words, the cost recovery award should generally be made in the absence of special circumstances payable immediately, and then the licensee or former licensee can work out a payment plan. So many proposed decisions have come through where there's a revocation of a license, and the administrative law judge will administratively and unilaterally determine that it's only payable upon reinstatement. There's no basis for that in the regulations, and the intent of this aspect of the precedential decision is to curtail that process unless there are some special circumstances that would warrant a specific order in a particular case. Thank you.
Mr. Swenson, should we clarify this then? Do you think?
That helps with my understanding. Thank you.
Okay.
The text is a fair reflection of what's in the precedential decision on this point.
Okay.
If there is some confusion, we can add an explanation. The problem with that, of course, is that if there's any variance between what's stated in the precedential decision and what's in the description of it, it could create a problem in an enforcement case and could also give rise to a claim that there's an underground regulation being applied.
Yes, and that's why enforcement suggested this language. Okay, so pleasure of the board. Move forward or work on this a little bit.
As I said, it answered my question. I have no further need to hear any more clarifications. Thank you.
All right. So, is there any other questions or comments? If not, I'll move to section 2, fiscal and staff. This, of course, the nuts and bolts of the board's operations. Are we getting, our funding sources, our reserves, and the best part of this report is, I would think one of the best parts of this report is the fact that our reserve level is increasing. As most of you will recall, this time last year, our fee increase took effect, and while it wasn't a very pleasant and wanted move forward, it has stabilized our revenue stream tremendously, so that we believe that, as you can see in the table from here, it will be going up. The one thing that isn't discussed in the report, but we probably will get asked, of course, is that it is actually discussed someplace that is there a statutory limit to the months in reserve or the amount in reserve? We do not have that statute right now. We might want to consider that at some point.
Elaine, I have a quick question.
Go ahead.
What is somewhere in the back of my mind, I feel like there was a line that was demarcated of how many months we needed to have in reserve. And with this 12.7, have we surpassed what we're supposed to have in reserve?
Yeah, the general rule of thumb, it's not a statutory thing at all. It's just one of those recommendations, preferred practices. They would like to see something like 4 to 6 months in reserve for any given entity, and so we're very healthy right now.
That's nice.
It is. It's kind of a nice change for us.
It feels like we're going in with a whole. It looks very different than it did 2 years ago.
Absolutely right. So next, we have never had any general fund loans. Question 10 is interesting. This is something that the legislature always really likes to look at, and that's the proportion of how our board runs. So based on what we spend on enforcement, on licensing, on administration. We do not have, I think, education really well represented as a subtotal in this, and that's really just the way that the books are kept. But one of these days, we really should figure out a way to break that out better. As you can see, our pro rata contribution, which is what we send back to the departments for our infrastructure, is somewhere between 28 and 30% each year, which, by the way, is a large amount of money. So again, here's the expenditures by components. So let's see. So here, of course, we're talking about the large amount of work that we did over the past few years to change our fee structure, basically to increase it to the statutory limits for the VM, PT, and CE provider fees. It was a large jump, and like I said, it was not a very, very happy decision on our part, but we really, unfortunately, had no choice in the matter to increase the fees that much. I do hope that at some point we can revisit that for the licensees. So these, of course, this table, again, I got to apologize for, the headers here, but this will show you what the fee amount was and is, what the statutory limit is. At this point, we are at the statutory limit for everything. What our revenue looked like in each of the 4 fiscal years, and the percentage of what each of these topics, each of these items makes up out of our revenue stream. So you can see that most of these fees are very, very tiny amounts of income. The big ones, of course, are the application fees, the renewal fees, and examinations. So that being said, fiscally healthy right now, and I think we're in a very good position to move forward, and we have, I think, a good solid footing right now. Question 13 is the budget change proposals we submitted during this period, one of which was to augment our licensing staff, and one of which was to comply with the sunset bill, which added the 2 NECs and 1 AGPA for the education division. Moving on, staffing issues. This is actually kind of a changing point for us from last year. We've had, even though staff turnover in licensing was always pretty regular, let's call it, but these past year and maybe 2 years, we've seen it ratchet up a bit. A lot of factors go into that, not the least of which is the fact that these are considered entry-level positions. It's not uncommon to see them come in and within a year they get a promotion here or someplace else. But it's difficult because our program techs are the kind of the rock foundation, doing so much of the day-to-day work, customer service work. We'd like to think that we can improve that, but that's going to take, I think, a little bit of statewide help. I'm particularly pleased about our work with the NECs, and this is, by the way, one of the first questions that Ms. Sanson had. I think the more senior board members will recall that both we and the BRN have always had problems recruiting and retaining NECs because there's such an unusual combination of skills and experience. And so to respond to Ms. Sanson's question, she had asked me what they are, what makes them unique, and how that's monitored and compensated for. So in a nutshell, the NECs tend to need to have first off, they need to be nurses. Second off, they almost always need to have some solid experience in nursing education, if not actually running a school or teaching at a school. They need to have some experience in that kind of student, examination or preparation. And they need to understand the laws and regs. So what happens, Ms. Sansan, is the department is well, obviously the state as a whole, but really only our department uses NECs like this. They have like a regular eligibility list that they'll post, and people can apply to be on the eligibility list. I believe it's refreshed quarterly. And so when we do have a vacancy, we advertise it in general, but if a person is not on the eligibility list, by the time we make a hire, we can't hire them. And the same, of course, for the supervising NEC. So I think actually, but like I said, I'm particularly proud that right now, our education unit is so solid. People apparently want to work for our team, but our NECs are supplemented by 2 AGPAs and a program tech who support the supervising nursing education consultant. The work that the unit did in response to the sunset last time really, I think, moved us a lot down the field. So really, really my compliments and my appreciation to that team so much, and led by Misty Young. So, like I said, I think the education program, the staffing changes have been really positive ones that we really, I think, strengthened that. Similarly, our enforcement staffing changes, we went from a period before I started in 2018 where the enforcement division was being reconfigured and rearranged to make sure that there was adequate people doing each facet of the work. And after the monitor's report that guided our changes between 2016 and 2018, we had a functioning enforcement division that then worked really hard and did a great deal to move the backlogs down considerably. But when Chief Wood joined us in 2020, because this is just the way she does things, she started her own acclimation by examining and reviewing and auditing the workload and the workforce in the unit. And she basically picked apart who does what. Do we have the right number of people at the right classification doing the work? And she spent a lot of time rebuilding, I think, and reconfiguring the enforcement division, which again, I think it really increased our efficiency there. Our numbers did fluctuate quite a bit here. A great portion of that, of course, is our inevitable response to the Nightingale investigations, which increased our total caseload, but we've been processing things very, very well. So again, my kudos to our division there. We did have, of course, as I think you all know, last summer we had a number of transitions at the senior level. Our AEO, Nikki Lyman, retired, and we were able to hire Mr. Mito. Ms. Cordero retired as our SNEC, and we were able to have Ms. Young move into leadership, and that made a big difference. But like I said, we were very, very solid. Here's the final point, of course, about succession planning. Again, Ms. Sansan raised a great point of this is an important thing. And Ms. Sansan, you are absolutely right. The board should absolutely make that a priority. The pleasure of the board being whether we whether the board wants to delegate that to the executive committee to work on early in the year, or whether this becomes part of our strategic plan work, which is going to probably start maybe in the spring, certainly not very much later than that. But yeah, absolutely. We would all be better off if there was a solid plan. And Ms. Sanson's question here, of course, with regard to staff development, and Ms. Sanson points out, and she's absolutely right, and thank you for catching me on this. There is a big difference between staff development and staff training, and it's not really well reflected in this language. But I think, Ms. Sanson, you put it really beautifully, that training is what they do and development is what they are. I liked that so much. So again, this is something that I agree that we need to work on. Our training budget has been pretty static, and we've been able to do a lot of really good work with that. But in terms of development, you know, there are programs that are available to us through the department and through the rest of the LHR. But there's also some things that we should be doing internally. I know that the teams themselves have taken it upon themselves to do things like the team building kinds of exercises. One of the ones that we've had great success with is that what is that called? The colors, True Colors, which helps us to all kind of define our own working style, communication style, and learn about the people around us, and so how we best work together. But again, I think I would be really interested in hearing some examples or some ideas from you, from the board members, all of you. But Ms. Sanson, I know that coming from private sector, you probably have some things you've seen that would be just a really revolutionary thing for the state employees. So I'd love to talk further with you about that. And again, this could be something that we impanel a special committee on, that we make part of the strategic plan, or delegate to the executive committee. So we can come back to that. As long as you feel like the question for the report is answered.
Yes, thank you.
Good deal. All right. So that moves us to section 3, licensing. There's that hanging header again. I hate that. So here, of course, we've posted our stats in terms of application processing. And I will say, by the way, in recognition of the licensing team, despite the fact that they have been kind of beat up and have a lot of vacant chairs, they've still managed to do a super good job in serving the public. So again, thank you to team licensing. You know, these figures will show you how we've done from year to year. And again, we don't seem to have a wide fluctuation here, you know, from year to year. The exception being, of course, these equivalency applications, which we'll talk about in a bit. That's going to continue to be a key issue for the board to work on. So in general, as I said, our general processing has been really good. So equivalency, of course, is an issue for us, and I don't want to get bogged down because it is a really dense and technical issue of how we practice these. But suffice it to say, well, a board has always been committed to making certain that we have these alternate licensing paths. The fact is that somebody who wants to apply in challenge and didn't go through one of the education programs, or didn't complete one, or is coming here from a different country, because there has been a lot of history of fraud, and especially now in the Nightingale investigations, we are more vigilant than ever in terms of making sure that we look at every single piece of paper that people submit to that they want to be allowed to go ahead and take it down. So again, this is going to be something that we're going to be working on for a long time yet. Moving on, how are we denied over the past 4 years based on criminal history? This has been a big issue for us for a long time as well, and it, of course, was put into big focus by a piece of legislation, AB 2138. Now pardon me, I'm gonna hate me for this. The fact is that we don't deny people very often on the basis of criminal history. We rely on all these documents that they're submitting, and they have to submit, their fingerprints, their criminal history backgrounds. All the applicants complete the live scan or the manual fingerprint card, and the license is not issued until the board gets complete background info. Now, as I said, we have not denied somebody based solely on their failure to disclose information, but we're watching it very carefully. And because AB 2138 sought to help lower barriers to licensure for people who had a history of imprisonment or criminal history, we still do look at everything under that lens of whether it substantially relates to your qualifications to be a nurse or a psych tech. We do fingerprint everybody. The national database we use, of course, is through the National Council. It's enormous, but we do depend on it for example, for people who apply to license here, who had been trained and licensed and worked in another state or jurisdiction. So we'll be looking at that history as well before we'll allow them to get a license here. We do require primary source documentation. We want to make certain that all the integrity is there. If we receive transcripts from other countries or in languages other than English, they are certified by a third-party organization. And so we actually do. I think I passed by a question. Yeah, there it is. Again, a question Ms. Sansan had asked with regard to our data system does not contain the data necessary to give account of applications where failure to disclose was used as aggravating factor. Ms. Sansan, I got to tell you, our data is configured by the Breeze system that we use to track, and when it was initially developed and implemented, there were fields. Subsequently, we found there are other fields that we would really like to track, but because the Breeze system doesn't, we can't at this point. But this is something to follow up on. Breeze is an imperfect system, and I know that they are constantly working on ways to fix it, ways to update it. We should certainly be part of that conversation going forward. I think. Were there any other comments or questions on how the licensing programs are working? Great. Okay, so our military licensees or applicants, I think everybody may be aware that there's been a significant amount of legislation, both state and federal, making certain that military veterans or active service members, people who are called up on reserves, and military spouses, that the licensing functions are as efficient as they possibly can be. That, you know, there's in a lot of areas, they make special waivers for them. We have never needed to make a special waiver to bump an applicant from the military up because our processing has been fast enough that it hasn't really made a difference. So I'm very pleased about that. But of course, we're watching the law. We will absolutely follow the law. We absolutely follow. We track the applicants who are veterans. We're totally compliant with all the laws regarding military education, training, and experience. Here, of course, are the applications we've got in our testing period. It's been a mixed bag. So there's not really a way to predict a trend here. So, and we expedited these processes and waived these fees. And here we're getting into the exam data, which, by the way, as nerdy as I am, this is, I think, a really fascinating amount of information. Obviously, we've separated it out to the Psych-Tech examination, which is California specific. We work with the department to develop this examination. We do regular workshops with our subject matter experts, licensees, to make sure that the questions in the exams are fresh and applicable. The department helps us develop all of this, but we also contract with a third-party group to administer the exams all through California, and that's PSI. We did have a occupational analysis on the Psych-Techs finished in 2019, and we never did manage to get a really thorough conversation with OPES and the board on the findings on the occupational analysis, but they will be starting a new one this coming year, and I'm looking forward to seeing how that's going. Because one interesting footnote, the number of psych techs has actually dropped in the past few years, and it's disturbing to a lot of people, not the least of whom is the people who train them and the people who employ them. This is something that we're going to want to look at, and I know that we've talked a bit about this. I know that I've had quite a few conversations with Mr. Hill about this. This is something that we're going to want to spend some time looking at. Obviously, for vocational nurses, we use the national exam that is coordinated by the National Council. So this is, like I said, a really interesting piece of information.
Elaine?
Yo.
You know, I just have to put this out there. It makes me wonder if NCSBN at some point in the future wouldn't consider making the psych tech licensing exam part of them. It's, you know, we've talked about this before. It's the name. It doesn't sound like a nurse, but it really is a nurse, and it really should fall under nursing. I don't know. It's, and as more states look at this position and the problems we're having with mental health and how integral this position is to mental health, it just makes me wonder if in the future, some of these things might become a possibility. Is that just like pie in the sky?
It's not. It really is not. And I appreciate the thought here too. I know we've talked about this a bit over the years. I always wondered about this, and I've spoken with mostly because there's not like a professional association. There's the union, and they are basically the professional association, and they do a great job, I think. But they only represent the state employed psych techs. So we had a lot of conversations about this, and I know that the board has said a number of times that there's a real value, I think, in having the conversation of, can we better position, examine the scope, training, and yes, the title of the psych techs to make this a little bit better, because quite honestly, there's a whole lot of places, both public and private sector, that I think psych techs are uniquely qualified to be providing service and patient care. Antoinette had once observed that
I even wonder about a conversation with Nancy Spector at NCSBN, because I think it would add credibility if they could. I feel like they need to be under that auspice of nursing. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. And, it's interesting that you mentioned NCSBN, because every state must have somebody doing this kind of work. Probably not configured exactly the way our site takes, but probably pretty close. I know that there are probably ENVNs that kind of have that special certification, or, there are other kinds of techs or services. There have to be substantial amounts of professionals doing this sort of work everywhere. So doing kind of, a survey or an inventory of what they're classified, what their scope looks like in other states. This is something that would be a really good endeavor for us. It's just that we've never really had the staffing bandwidth to really launch into a big research project like this. But I would love to have a conversation with Dr. Spector.
I think she could probably help us and maybe give us some direction, and maybe food for thought for them too, about if we're really under nursing, let's all be under nursing. We've been talking about this for years. Maybe now is the time.
Maybe, especially like I said, as you point out, and you're absolutely right, that there is such a heightened concern and attention being paid now to not just mental health in general, but mental health among certain professions like healthcare, mental health among the homeless.
I was going to say like nursing.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. So a really good thing for us to put. We had this as part of the strategic plan last time, but we hadn't ever managed to really move that needle. And so I would suggest that we really talk about this in that context of how we can really move forward meaningfully. Anything else on licensing? Great. Appreciate it. Here, of course, we get some minutiae of the way testing works. So here, of course, we have the really big meaty part of this report, and not to put too fine a point on it, the issues we were directed to fix from our last sunset review. So these next questions, of course, deal with the way we set out to meet our obligations under the Sunset Bill. So obviously, we spent a lot of time and energy working first internally and then with council on our regulations to enact the school approval process. Council Shield isn't here today, but she really did provide just an amazing amount of work and help. But again, teen education spent so much time looking at fine-tuning, picking apart every single piece of forms or policies or whatever requirements we had to build a really solid, really successful approval process, which included, for the first time ever, of course, a fee schedule for new and continually improved schools. It is substantially less than would actually fund the education program. In fact, I think my rough numbers were something like maybe 20% of what our actual costs are. But this is the time for us to mention that again and to ask for some conversation forward. But again, like these next pages talk about our new laws and regs with regard to how programs can apply to be new schools and how they apply to continue their approval. I think some of you will recall from the 2021 sunset review that at that time our program approval wait list was something like 50 or 60 programs, some of whom had been on that list for a number of years. We don't have a wait list anymore because with the help of the legislature, we were able to just, I think, kind of switch around, upend really the process and ask the programs, the applicants, to do the work up front rather than wait in line and then be asked to do the work. So before they apply, before they move forward, they have to show all the work. They have to have all their curriculum, their policies, and everything ready to go before they're assigned to an NEC to work. And so that has it's made a huge difference. So now, of course, here, by the way, is a suggestion that Ms. DeYoung had sent me today. In fact, just to add to the conversation about the role for the BPPE and our relationship. But Ms. DeYoung sent me some updated numbers. Thank you very much. But we don't have a wait list. We have these programs that apply, and if they're ready to move forward, they're assigned to an NEC. At this point in time, 24 programs have applied, sent in their letters of intent, 20 private or community colleges. So our numbers, I think, are so small, although I didn't get the kind of tsunami response that I was expecting, but the progress has been very steady and I think really noteworthy that people are understanding that to be approved to do this work, you have to be ready. And the legislature agrees with us. The industry agrees with us. It's absolutely fair and reasonable to expect that, yeah, you can't just say, hey, I want to have a school. So, as I said, the programs have done a great job. And I think, again, noteworthy from the board, really, I think, did a terrific job here. In terms of continuing education, I think some of you will recall that CE was, again, one of the things that this board had been really criticized for. I think we're in the point of we were just launching the new CE audit for licensees that we had planned to start very modestly with about 2.5% of the population spread throughout the year. And we managed to get a few of those months audits sent out and received back before the pandemic. So we put everything back on hold as directed by the governor's office. And right now our team is looking at how best to get that started again and at what capacity. The team feels like one of the best places to start would be to audit the current probationers. So we'll be working on that, and the board, of course, will see our reports on that coming in later. So let's see the numbers here that we actually managed to conduct these audits. So the course approval process, and again, this is another question that Ms. Sanson had asked me about. The way we approve the courses, of course, is just through the basic regs, but no, we don't manage to audit the CE providers. I would love to if we had the resources to do so, because I'm not convinced that all of them are doing exactly what they say they're supposed to do by the regs. But unfortunately, and Mr. Swenson can correct me on this, but absent any statutory or regulatory authority being provided, we can't really audit them per se. But we have, of course, over the years experienced a rash of complaints or reports on a program that is doing something vastly wrong, that we've been able to go and investigate the complaints. And if the complaints were sustained, we were able to close the program. But systematic audit, that would be a really good thing, I think. Questions on CE?
I'll just say thank you, Lynn, for explaining.
Oh, thank you. Like I said, you asked some great questions. So again, so here we are, Section 4 enforcement. Now this, of course, is absolutely enormous part of what we do, and again, kudos to the division, the staff, and management, and Chief Wood. We've been, I think, doing a great job for the most part in meeting the performance measures. This is a tricky business in any case. Every single board and bureau runs into problems in terms of making certain that they are keeping a watchful eye on their licensees. Our team has been doing a great job in keeping the cases moving, making certain that we investigate all the complaints and reports. And so again, we're doing a good job, I think, overall. The trends, of course, are a little bit hard to really chart, but I think generally in the past 3-4 years, fiscal years, we've done pretty much that same thing. And this Wood you can break in anytime you want, by the way. But as I said, the caseload has changed a little bit. One thing that we have done, of course, one was the board's decision to delegate the petitioner hearings to make up the backlog and to move it forward. I know that the enforcement team and the committee are still looking at ways to look back at constructing the hearing process and finding an efficient way of making certain that is as accessible and board run as possible. As I said, they've been busy. They created an outreach plan. They've done the two PSAs, which, by the way, I thought were outstanding. If I could put them on TV, I would. And they've been working on knowledge transfer, which makes certain that the teams are trained and cross-trained, that they understand what happens where. So again, they've been doing a terrific job, not just in the case management, but in the division management. So let's see. They do a lot of work internally, of course, but they huddle up and do reviews and triage together and share information from unit to unit. So again, the committee, of course, was really great and helpful, and hats off to Mr. Maxey, who's been a great chair for the committee for the last 3 years.
Hi, Elaine. Since you said I could jump in, I hope you don't mind if I take you up on that offer.
Please do. Go ahead.
So I'd like to talk about our committee a little. I don't think our committee gets the spotlight it should as far as the work that our board members are doing with us. Our committee has been incredibly supportive in creating our initiatives. They've really helped guide us, move us in the right direction for making the right decisions for the right reasons. And I really want to say thank you to our committee. I'm hoping that, as you guys select committees next year, you'll think about the enforcement division. We're looking to do a lot of great work. We're always looking, to ensure we have at least one licensee member. That is our goal, is to have at least one licensee member and then one public member, because I think it's very, very important to have that diversity of understanding of what our board should do and how we should protect consumers. But I would like to say thank you to our enforcement committee. And I think that next year, hopefully we'll get some folks volunteering and we'll have a great time.
Well, that really was a good one. Thank you. So let's see. So the division also worked a lot on our website, being certain that information is not just available, but actually understandable. How about that for a concept? So as I said, our report, I think, for enforcement work is pretty positive. The numbers look very, very solid. Like I said, we have seen some increases and some waves up and down, but we've never managed to slink back into that really dangerous backlog that this board had prior to 2018, that a lot of other boards have currently. So again, we have some good work to report to the legislature on this. Any other questions on enforcement, by the way? I corrected the typo here. In terms of case aging, Ms. Wood had sent me some updates here that I put in today. So in terms of case aging, in other words, how long these programs, these individual cases have been taking to completely close. But again, we have every reason to expect that the backlog is going to continue to decrease, and our processing timelines are going to improve.
Hi, Elaine, if you don't mind me jumping in one more time, sorry.
Not at all.
I'd like to talk about some of the things we're doing with the DAG. So as you can see, our case aging, it's declining. We are working with the DAG as far as ensuring that continues to decline. Our discipline unit and our discipline manager, Jay Prouty, have been doing an excellent job with this. I would like also to say that we're looking forward to doing some more innovative things with the Attorney General's office. Right now, they're working to reach out to all the potentially all of the counties so that we get notified a little quicker, so we can work a little closer with the district attorneys and the city attorneys. So I hope to have more information on that coming soon, but I do want to say that we're trying to be a little more innovative to kind of move things along. So you may see more things coming next year.
And one thing that I also know that we've done a better job over the past couple of years than in years prior is really developing that MOU relationship with a number of the other boards and bureaus that have some kind of overlapping in our professions, so that we can share information in terms of moving complaints back and forth for those cases. Most notably, of course, the RNs, the respiratory care techs, and we'll be moving along that. I actually suggested to the director that why don't we just have a universal MOU for the healing arts groups, and I got a kind of a so we'll see how that goes. Prioritization, reporting. We're following the law to the letter. So dollar thresholds and settlements. If I'm going too fast again, please give me a shout here, or Rebecca will know if you raise your hand. Here actually is some of the work we were doing collaboratively with some of the other divisions and boards. And, it's our Cite and Find program, by the way. This is a pretty vigorous program, and I think it's been tremendously successful. We haven't really changed the way we do things or the levels, but we do see quite a lot of these come through the program on a regular basis. A lot of times, we're talking about DUIs, and so the board is using Cite and Find appropriately, I think, in terms of regulating our licensees. So. These, by the way, in red here, this is the pages we swapped out from the first version to the second version. Some review here on what we've been seeing in terms of the types of conferences that we've been having, the types of issues we've been seeing, how much we've been, how many citations we're issuing, about how much that's been on average. And of course, if we can't collect, we do refer things to the Franchise Tax Board. So let's see, questions on this yet?
No questions, but thank you.
Good deal. All right, and that's the deleted version. So that should bring us to public information policies. Ooh, something I did change the numbering here too. Sorry about that. I'm gonna have to go back and fix that. We post our agendas and minutes. This, by the way, I want to say is a big improvement from our last sunset report. At that point, we were like probably pretty many other organizations, really trying hard to convert our materials to the ADA compliant versions, and it took a lot longer than to make certain that all of our materials were converted so they could be posted, which means that a lot of the archive information, which was not converted, we have unfortunately taken off the website, at least the accessible website. It's still available in our files. So if somebody were to ask us about something that was part of a particular board meeting, we would be able to provide that. I think we talked a lot about our webcasting, our annual calendar. We did that, and how we disclose everything. So right now, consumers can access Breeze through DCA's portal, and they can find out, if you're an employer, for example, you can look up a nurse or a psych tech to see if there is any disciplinary action on them before you hire them. And then, of course, consumer outreach and education. This is something that we have started to do much better, but there's still a vast amount we can do more of. Again, the work that the enforcement division did, the education division's been doing a lot of really interesting work, making certain that there's all kinds of almost foolproof information and counsel on how to apply to be a program. Really excellent information. Online practice, our licensees can't practice independently, so this is not relevant to us. Workforce development and job creation. Again, Ms. Sansan asked me about this. This is a good question, by the way, too. We haven't really been able to do much in terms of the data gathering and processing ourselves. What happens with us is we provide raw data to the other side of the healthcare, um, healthcare access and information department, and they're the ones that are doing that analysis and that research to find out trends and issues confronting the workforce and finding out where there are areas that really need some attention. And that's a statewide group. So it advises, the legislature and the governor's office as well. Could we do more? I'd sure like to, but at this point, our own kind of workforce development activities have kind of been on the ground floor. For example, I know that the NECs have had a lot of conversations with the Psychiatric schools to talk about the fact that the enrollment numbers are dropping, employment numbers are dropping, and what can we do together to help prepare that. So again, these are things that we can certainly look at a way to address through the board's own work, but also, to possibly look at a way to pursue it via the strategic plan.
Thank you. I would love that.
I'm volunteering you for a whole lot of things,
Okay. It's fine with me.
Good. So, and here's a really interesting point. The barriers to licensure and employment that we believe are really problematic. The cost of and access to education programs is probably, I think, the biggest. Well, I think, I could be wrong here, but I believe that the cost of access to educational programs is one of the most pressing barriers to licensure, because most of the private programs charge like $35,000-$45,000 for a 1-year program, and this is hard. It's these programs are well run, they do a great job, but there's no guidelines, there's no ceiling on what they can charge a student, and the value could be kind of inconsistent. The schools that are run through community colleges are a lot more, and Dr. Mountain's not going to appreciate this, I think they're probably a lot more parallel isn't really the word I'm looking for, but similar, I think, in what they're teaching, and the comparability of what they're teaching and their pace. But they charge less than $10,000 most of the time, and so there's always a wait list for them. Truthfully, if anybody had wanted to ask what the state could do to improve the numbers of people entering nursing programs and graduating and going to work, I would absolutely say that helping community colleges expand their programs would be right up there. Providing more financial aid would be right up there. Any questions as I step off my soapbox there?
I just second your soapbox big time. And I wish that community colleges its administration could see the value in having more of these programs. It seems like we used to have more at community colleges, and it's because I found that really interesting. I think it said 44 of the programs were at community college currently. And I believe that there was a time when we had the majority and the private schools were in the minority, but it's been many years ago.
No, there used to be at least 60-something community colleges that were running a BN program.
Well, it's that whole fallacy that's at community college that nursing programs are expensive to run, even though they forget that nursing programs, that's how the students come to community college. We're the feeders for all these prereqs, right? So it's a it's a tough one.
Yeah. Oh. So let's see. As I said, our priority for the past couple of years has been placed on increasing the number of schools. And while I certainly like to say that you can't have a new program unless you go out to one of the more underserved areas of the state instead of, say, Glendale or Orange County or San Diego or Riverside, I don't get to make that choice. Okay. Any other questions on those? Because here's where I start getting wacky on current issues and then the new issues. Obviously, we're in complete compliance with the uniform standards. The enforcement is working on disciplinary guidelines. In fact, actually, the draft documents are in the hands of council, and they're going to be working on that next. We've been using the CPEI since 15, and we've been, I think, very compliant with that. And we used to be a lot more vocal in terms of the Breeze meetings of how to fix Breeze, what new functions need to come about. We haven't been able to do so as much, but we also, the department kind of changed the way that they were having those meetings, and we were kind of between experts here. I think now that we do have a full-time IT expert, we may try and get back into being a more regular conversant on that. Response to COVID, at this point, obviously our response to COVID is we're still recovering from the damage that the pandemic brought to our educational programs, as well as where all the nurses and psych techs work. But we worked really hard to make sure that the schools and programs didn't have to just shut down, that they could continue with a little bit of flexibility on our part in terms of moving the students through, especially in terms of them being able to teach online and some flexibility in the way they were able to make their clinical assignments. Still nothing? Okay. So this is, as I said, this is the part where we're going to get kind of meaty. Board action and responses to prior sunset issues. These are the big ones. There were a lot, actually, more in the technical aspects. Obviously, our work with the Respiratory Care Board has been up and down, really, but I think in as much as they've been authorized to seek an author for legislation, I don't know if they've had any conversations lately. I need to follow up on that, but once they start that process, we would, I think, be very active in that conversation. But we've also been, I think, providing them with the same response to the priorities they've set, which is why, that we don't believe that they should be limiting where an LVN can do what in different settings. We've never done that. I think it's a really false economy, and I know that we've had a lot of conversation about why not just train everybody and then let employers choose whether or not they do require this kind of skill level or whether they really require a respiratory care practitioner. We have a lot of, I think, differences of opinion really in the way we define things. I know that we've talked internally, myself and certainly Ms. Young, on ways in which we could probably expand upon our regulatory language and scope based on defining what basic assessment is and what these essential basic care services are. And really, I think perhaps documenting better where it is that our licensees are trained to do this in their basic licensure programs. So we're hoping to work and continue to work with RCB. Right now, there's not anything, obviously it's, December, nothing ever interesting happens in December, right? This is the second issue. When we were first talking about this in 2019, we didn't think this was much of an issue for our board because our board members, our licensees, are independent practitioners. They have to practice under a physician or RN. But lately, the board's received reports of these temporary posting services like Clipboard and places like that are recruiting for LVNs, and they assign them to shifts without really knowing what it is that is required of them or who's supervising them on the floor or what they've been trained to do, let alone like the real fine tune of what they are trained to do. So we've had some issues with that. I imagine that as we go forward, we don't think that that it would meet the Department of Industrial Relations criteria for what an independent contractor can be. So we've had some conversations and communications with them. We will be following up with that. But this is going to be a very interesting issue for the legislature. I know that certainly the labor activists in the legislature are going to be very, very interested in this. So, of course, my favorite theme, program approval fees. I do want to revisit this. It doesn't have to be this coming year, but it needs to be at some point soon. Medical spas. This was an interesting issue too. I think a lot of you will remember that we worked with a variety of different organizations to get information about Botox and similar procedures, and managed to make our precedential decision, which we got codified in SB 994, so that LVNs may not be asked to provide these services and these functions. Right now, I think that the work with the naturopathic doctors has a real potential to increase the risk of what LVNs could be asked to do that exceeds their scope. Naturopathy is new and different, and it's really hard to, I think, assess where their work pings with the standard education and training experience of an LVN or a psych tech. So we'll be working with them, developing some regs and hopefully following along with them, because we have prepared an MOU. We have suggested some things for their FAQs. But yeah, we'll certainly be working alongside. But interestingly enough, in the meantime, because we sometimes find that we have joint licensees with folks like Barbering Cosmetology Board, we've started to see a rise in complaints and issues with those practitioners where, again, we have to make certain that our practitioners, our LVNs, working within their scope, both as an LVN or a cosmetologist or an esthetician or whatever, and how we can share information to make certain that no matter what they're calling themselves, people are safe and being treated by appropriate personnel. Any questions on those? Okay, we're getting close to the end, so I've kept you a little longer than I'd planned to. New issues, and these are all suggested statutory changes. And when we put this together in this draft, we only put the vocational nurse sections in because obviously, if the legislature wants to pursue any of these options, the language is bound to change dramatically from here to there. And at that point, once the language is polished up and functional, then we would apply it into the psych tech law. The first couple of things I think are very interesting technical changes. One being biennial board elections. As you know, we have our board elections every February or first meeting of the year. I've kind of felt like doing it every other year and syncing up the committee appointments as well would increase our efficiency. So we'd like to suggest that. The second one is timely processing of per diem reimbursements requests. As we all know, the board members are entitled to their per diem and expense reimbursements. But what we've run into once or twice over the years is processing requests that were outside of the fiscal year. And it creates, really an accounting problem, because if the fiscal year prior, there's a claim on that fiscal year, and those books have been closed, there's a lot of, I don't even know what else to call it besides accounting fancy dancing, but it's a problem. And we feel like that even though our administrative policies do say that all these requests should be submitted within that fiscal year, statutory language might be a good thing. And I can't imagine that we're the only board that has this issue. Time limits for licensing. This is not quite worded quite as well as I would like, but the issue, of course, and I think a lot of you have seen this, certainly the education committee members have seen this, and this is the problem that there's no limit on how many times or how long an applicant can apply to take the licensing examinations, as long as they stay current on their application fees. California is one of the few states that doesn't have just a real hard limit. You can only take it 5 times or within this period of time without having to go back to school. We've seen stats that show just the huge difference between the first time test taking and second time test taking success rates. We've seen stats on the month after you leave school, and then that gradual trickle of how well you'll do on the exams. It's a problem, and we think it's actually a weird and consumer unfriendly problem, because I feel like these individuals who keep applying should be told to stop. Should not be continuing to think that after 7 years and 14 attempts at taking the NCLEX, they will magically pass. The likelihood decreases dramatically each single time. Some do, obviously some do, but we feel like setting a limit, a good, reasonable limit, would be better for schools, certainly, who have to chart and account for their test taking successes. I think it's much better for the applicants, and it's going to make our efficiency so much better, because
Elaine, do we increase how much we charge every time they retake the boards?
No.
I think that the BRN was doing that at one time. I'm not sure they're doing it now, but it used to cost, for each time you failed, there was an additional fee. And that was also a pretty big deterrent for people, a motivator for them to pass the boards. So,
I would imagine so. Oh my God.
Yeah.
I don't think they do that anymore, though. But I'll ask BRN about that, because
it would definitely be a motivator.
As I said, most of the states, the vast majority of the states, have a very, very fair, I think, but set limit of how many times you do this. So like I said, the concept I would suggest would be you can't renew after a certain number of period. I put in 5 years, unless you go through a refresh, you go through the course again. We would probably need to work with this language to make certain that, you know, if there was approved CE providers. Right now, if I'm not mistaken, if a student like either didn't complete a unit of the course, they can apply to a school if they have a vacant seat for that particular semester, and go through and finish that way. I think that's the case for folks who just want to take the the subject matter. So again, this is something that, you know, I would wonder if either the for-profits or publics programs might want to look into just having the programs, you know, not quite like elective offerings, but just some of the courses in a more encapsulated thing, more widely available. So this is something that we've talked about for a long time. I know BRN is also really interested in this concept too. So I'm really hoping that the legislature would like to have a conversation about this. So alternate pathways to licensure, we talked about a bit about this. So the method 3 applicants and the method 5 applicants are a world different. Method 3, these are people who have had some education and some experience. Method 5 are the folks who have experience only plus the pharmacology course. Now, method 5 applicants, it is a well, it's a hard process to go through. It takes a huge amount of time. It's a vast amount of forms and hoops they have to show, you know, where you were employed. You have to have documentation from an RN that you worked in these areas for the appropriate number of hours. It's really hard. It's also really unusual. I think, you know, we've seen numbers of the folks who managed to get authorized to test as taking probably more than a year, and then, you know, still being less than 20% actually moving forward. So we want to, but the thing that's moving this into a higher level of concern here is that we want to, again, you know, in reflection of the Nightingale cases, we want to be certain that there are not really easy fraudulent opportunities. There have been a lot of businesses that offer, you know, coaching and, you know, workshops and classwork, and other, like, you know, form filling out help to move a CNA to become an LVN, or at least become eligible to test. But, you know, this is of course rife with problems. There's no way you can guarantee somebody is going to be successful no matter what. But we feel like clarifying the languages would be a good thing, I think, from a consumer service and protection point of view. One being, I think, that the pharmacology course not be considered, well, heck, that's all the education you need. I know that the licensing staff have noticed and have remarked a number of times on how much of a difference it makes in an applicant's ability to first qualify and then take, you know, successfully take the NCLEX of just some in-class experience, some didactic experience. So we want to, I think about this, and again, like I said, I'm presenting this as a concept for the board to really think whether this is something we want to discuss, move forward, maybe not this year, but maybe next year, maybe the year after, maybe embark on a larger amount of research and analysis on this. So we want to think about the ways that we can be better able to, one, prevent fraud, and two, I think, be able to assist folks who want to pursue these alternate pathways. So, and that brings, of course, to program fees. Now here, of course, I went back to language that we had been suggesting in 2021 in terms of developing the fee structure for the programs. This, of course, brings the program approval process fees a little higher. It also moves the continuing approval fee back to the sliding scale concept that we had discussed a bit, whereby a small program would be paying substantially less than a program with 300 students. I continue to think that this is a very good and fair way of going about this. And then this whole new idea of creating a non-refundable fee for schools placed on provisional approval. This was left out of the fee policy in 21. And truthfully, we don't have a lot of programs on provisional. I think there are 3 at this point. But what we do want to do, and I think the presence of this fee would encourage people to, 1, not get there, and 2, to work as hard as they can to get off provisional as quickly and solidly as they could, so that they would be, back on that, regular approval. This would be, of course, a surcharge on the school. They would be paying, obviously, their regular continuing approval fee that's assessed every 4 years, but this would be a special fee. And it's based on the workload that the NECs provide, the consultation that they provide these programs to help them bring their program up. So this is bound to create some waves. I actually feel like it's not going to be something that people are going to jump into. And I actually think that in as much as we're fiscally pretty solid right now, we could afford to wait. We had talked to the department's budget and fiscal department about this in particular, but in general, our fee policy, our revenue stream. And they had said that because our new fee structure had only been in place for a year, they would recommend that we not try to do that in-depth revenue study that would really allow us to understand what would be a fair and sustainable revenue stream. So as I said, this is probably a year or 2 out maybe, but it is something that we need to continue to discuss. If for no other reason that these programs don't pay what the work we provide them. And in the meantime, all of the work that the board does is balanced on our licensees for the most part. Hours of instruction. This is something that we had talked about internally a bit, and I think we've some of you might remember that we've had a number of folks address the board about the regulatory requirements for certainly for clinical experience. And I think we all know that California, of course, has probably the highest requirements for hours of instruction and clinicals. And it's been suggested that this is a barrier. So I think one thing we would probably want to do is look into changing the statute a bit so that hours as determined by the board would permit staff and board to work on, I think, researching and analyzing what would be a fair and accurate process, what would be a good level number, and also, allow us to look at the formula of the number of hours per chunk of lessons, like what would be for med surg or for OBGYN or pediatrics. So again, this is something that we want to think about, and this would be, I think it's almost a technical cleanup thing, because I think it gives us the flexibility to research, and it may well be that after research, we figure out that our level is exactly what it should be. But I think there's probably going to be some areas that we could discuss.
Well, Elaine, I know you already know, but I'm not sure the rest of the board knows that the Board of Registered Nursing really did this whole thing with the hours this past year for RN education, making 500 the total hours and decreasing the number of hours you have to have for mental health, OB, and peds. And really first time change for a long time, and making the face of RN education look a little different. So I think that would put us really in line with what's happening across the country and within nursing as a whole. So it's probably an important thing for us to look at.
I think so too. Thank you. So this next group, program approval process, these changes were suggested by the Education Division that would help clarify the language that was put in place by our Sunset Bill in 21, and I think allow us to implement and administer the program approval process a little bit better. And let's see, the list of inactive programs, because the list of inactive programs that was put into the bill, it was not as well thought out as it could have been. And so the NECs have been a little puzzled on how exactly to administer that. So their suggested amendment, I think, makes it something that would actually be a workable function in the process. So, next, program regulation and oversight. Here's one thing that's been very controversial that this board has suggested, actually before my time even, and that would be providing the NECs with site and fine authority over the schools and programs, and probably even the CE programs as well, so that I don't think it's ever going to be needed, but every time the NECs go out and make site visits, well, not every time, they find small violations of code and regs. And generally speaking, these days, we've been very fortunate that programs have been very amenable to the NEC's council and said, yeah, we'll fix that by September 30. We'll have that ready for you here. That was just a transitional problem. So we haven't really had problems with a program steadfastly refusing to correct their violations. But we figure that if the NECs had the ability to create a site for somebody, and it would be for something fairly egregious, I would think, it would pretty much accelerate a school's the alacrity with which they would correct their violations. So, and finally, retirement of licenses. This is something that we talked about for a couple of years, and interestingly enough, there was just a bill passed which directs ERN to create this, as a matter of fact. So we think that this is a really valuable thing in terms of, one, it's kind of a salute to a nurse who's served for a number of years, but it also would help us, I think, to combat any potential fraudulent use, somebody assuming the identity of a licensee, and we would probably look very carefully to see somebody of, wow, you look like you're 30 years old, but you've been licensed since 1960. How'd that happen? But again, we want to make certain that loopholes are tightened up, but obviously we want to be able to conform to the language that was enacted for BRN, and we should move forward on that as well. I think actually the suggested amendment, and actually it's fair to say that for all these suggested amendments, the suggested text that we put in this report, if they move forward, the suggested text is probably going to not bear a real striking resemblance to what is finally enacted by the legislature. That's just a given. But so long as the concepts themselves, the goals themselves, don't change, I think the board would be well served by some of these changes. Obviously, if anything does move forward, we'll be reporting to the board and all the relevant committees as things move forward. So that brings me to the end, and I appreciate everyone's attention and time. But so are there any overall questions or comments that I could answer for you? Thank you, Ms.
I was going to say no questions, but thank you for going over this with us. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Hill. Everybody else who's sending thumbs up and stuff, thank you. I appreciate it. As I said, this is it's been a long process, and the staff has worked very, very hard to pull all this information together. But I do believe that we have something to be proud of here. So unless there are other questions or comments, then what I would suggest is, obviously I do need a motion and a vote from the board. And Mr. Swenson was kind enough to draft some language for the motion. So I'm going to stop sharing here and allow Rebecca to pull that language up. During this awkward
Elaine,
silence.
do we have some language? Oh, thank you.
Yes, we do.
So, should I call for a motion if someone would like to make this motion?
There we go.
And I see Alita has her hand raised.
Do I need to verbally make the motion?
Yes, please.
Yes,
I think
please.
you have to read it, right?
Yes,
Mr.
please.
Swenson, doesn't she have to read it?
She can say so moved. Now,
Oh, okay.
in terms of the alternative text, there have been amendments discussed, so it would be as amended.
But I have a patient with me right
So I don't know if everyone heard that, but because amendments were presented and discussed in the meeting, then the clause as amended would apply. So with that caveat, the motion can simply be so moved and the second could be so seconded. Thank you.
That's easy.
Thank you.
So moved.
And Ms. Neeblis?
Oh, I was going to say I second.
Thank you so much. So it's been moved and seconded. Any board discussion or questions? Ms. Neeblis, you still have your hand up. I think that's from before.
Yes, I'm trying.
Thank you. I just didn't want to leave you out if you had a question. Any public comment?
The chat box has been opened at the bottom right-hand side of your screen if you would like to make public comment and you are online. If you are called in, small slide here. I guess. Okay, hold on. Sorry. to make a public comment on the phone, please, and to raise your hand, please press *3. I see no hands raised, Dr. Mountain.
Thank you so much. Seeing no public comment, I believe I can now take a roll call vote. Is that correct, Mr. Swenson?
That's correct, Madam Chair.
Thank you. All right, Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Thank you. Ms. Carpenter?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Durking?
Yes.
Mr. Hill?
Yes.
Mr. Maxey? All right, we'll move on. Ms. Moore?
Yes.
Ms. Niebles?
Yes.
Ms. Guzman?
Yes.
Ms. Sonson?
Yes.
And I am Carol Mountain, and I say yes. And that vote is carried by a vote of 9. So we move to agenda item 4, update, discussion, and possible action, board meeting logistics. Ms. Yamaguchi.
Well, this is a little anticlimactic now. You'll recall we discussed our 24-25 calendar at the November meeting, and Ms. Ball has taken the document we had there and made some corrections. So at this point, if we could pull it up. Rebecca, can you show what you changed?
Yes, the bolded date here for the February board 2025 meeting was originally listed as the 5th to 6th, and it should be the 6th to 7th. So that is the only amendment made to these dates.
So Madam Chair, if the board would be so kind, if there are any questions, I could happily answer, but the board would be so kind to approve their calendar for the next 2 years.
Are there any discussion or questions? Seeing and hearing none, any public comment?
Madam Chair, we don't have a motion pending. Would it be possible to get a motion in a second?
My apologies. Can we get a motion?
John Deerkin would so move.
Thank you. A second?
Abraham Hill, a second.
Thank you. Now I'll ask, any board discussion or questions? All right, seeing none, any public comment?
The chat box has been opened in the lower right-hand side of your screen. If you are calling in, please press *3 to raise your hand. I see no hands raised.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, the pending motion is to approve the board calendar as amended.
Yes. Do I need to do something else, Mr. Swenson?
No, just reiterating the motion before you call the roll.
Thank you. Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Ms. Carpenter?
Yes.
Mr. Durking?
Yes.
Mr. Hill?
Yes.
I believe Mr. Maxey is not with us. Ms. Moore?
Yes.
Ms. Niebles?
Yes.
Ms. Guzman?
Yes.
Ms. Sonson?
Yes.
Carol Mountain? I also vote yes. That motion is carried by a vote of 9. We will now move to agenda item 5, public comment on items not on the agenda. Please note the board may not discuss or take any action on any item raised during this public comment section, except to decide whether to place the matter on the agenda of a future meeting. I believe we need to open the chat box, yes?
Once again, the chat box is open. If you'd like to make a comment, please list yourself there. Or if you are on the phone, you may press *3 to raise your hand. I am seeing no hands raised, Dr. Mountain.
All right. I believe that we are ready to take a roll call for our board calendar. No, we did that. I'm sorry. My apologies. That was suggestions for future agenda items. There's none. Agenda item 7. Can we move to that, please?
There you go.
Closed session. The board will now convene in closed session pursuant to Government Code Section 1126, Subdivision A1, to deliberate and vote on disciplinary matters, and pursuant to Section 11126A1 of the Government Code, the board will meet in closed session for discussion and to deliberate the performance evaluation of the executive officer. Can I have a motion to approve this meeting adjourning at the conclusion of the closed session?
John Deerking would so move.
Thank you. A second?
Abraham Hill will second.
Thank you. Any board discussion or questions? Any public comment?
Once again, the chat box is open. If you would like to make a comment, please type comment and send to everyone. If you are calling in, please press *3 to raise your hand. I see no comments.
Thank
So,
you.
Madam Chair, to reiterate the motion, it is to adjourn the meeting after the conclusion of the closed session without returning to open session.
Yes. Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Ms. Carpenter?
Yes.
Mr. Durking?
Yes.
Mr. Hill?
Yes.
Mr. Maxey's not with us. Ms. Moore?
Yes.
Ms. Niebles?
Yes.
Thank you. Ms. Guzman?
Yes.
Ms. Sanson?
Yes.
And I'm Carol Mountain. I also vote yes. That vote carries by a vote of 9. This meeting stands adjourned at the conclusion of the closed session. Thank you.